morning, everyone, and welcome to this new webinar of the series 9 months, 9 universities for this academic year 2024-2025. My name is Géraldine Lyon. I'm an international project assistant at the University of Lyon 1, and I will be hosting today's talk. Before introducing today's webinar and speaker, let me give you a bit of context. The Arcus European University Alliance brings together 9 institutions which share academic, scientific, and cultural objectives, a common vision of the role of higher education and research, and mutual fields of interest. Today's webinar is part of the guest lectures series 9 months, 9 universities, offered in the framework of the Plurilingual and Intercultural Hub. This hub seeks to promote plurilingualism across the 9 institutions by leveraging the language skills of students, researchers, and staff, while also enhancing their intercultural competence and essential soft skills in today's global society. These lectures focus on specific topics related to language and culture and are intended to generate awareness and appreciation for the topic of multilingualism, as well as an understanding of the many areas of our lives that are related to and influenced by language. Let me now introduce today's speaker, Professor Justyna Deszcz-Tryhubczak, who is Associate Professor of Literature at the Institute of English Studies at the University of Wrocław in Poland. She is the author and co-editor of several books, including Intergenerational Solidarity in Children's Literature and Film, which was awarded the 2023 Edited Book Award from the International Research Society for Children's Literature. From 2017 to 2021, she served on the board of the IRCSL. From 2018 to 2024, she was the University of Wrocław coordinator of the Erasmus Mundus International Masters, Children's Literature, Media and Culture. Since 2023, she has been the University of Wrocław coordinator and academic lead in Seen and Heard, a project for young people's voices and freedom of expression. Since 2024, she has also been involved in COREM, Collective Remembrance, which is an international research project funded by the EU to involve European children and teenagers in the remembrance and education of historical genocides. Today, Professor Deszcz-Tryhubczak will explore the freedom of expression with children in Malta, Germany, and Poland. Children's literature and culture is a well-established international and interdisciplinary field that draws from various academic perspectives. It explores diverse storytelling traditions and the multicultural, transcultural nature of childhoods around the world. In today's hyper-connected world, children engage with a mix of global and local cultures, shaping complex identities. This is reflected in Transnational Children's Book, which portrays the lived experiences of communities across national, cultural, and linguistic boundaries. In this webinar, Professor Deszcz-Tryhubczak will present an example of the research project Seen and Heard, Young People's Voices and Freedom of Expression, which is a 3-year EU-funded collaboration of the University of Malta, University of Wrocław, Humboldt University in Berlin, and Amnesty International Poland. It explores the role of literature in the understanding of and exercising freedom of expression as one of children's fundamental rights. The project's goal is to nurture a social movement of children and adults who believe that freedom of expression is a basic human right for all. Before giving the screen to Professor Deszcz-Tryhubczak, I would like to remind you that you can leave your comments and questions in the comment box, and I will pass them on to Professor Deszcz-Tryhubczak at the end of the webinar. Well, Justyna, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today. The screen is now yours.
Thank you. Thank you. And I would like to thank the Arcus Alliance and colleagues from the Arcus Alliance for inviting me to speak on children's literature research with a focus on transnational, transcultural, and multicultural contexts that reflect the fluid, interconnected realities shaping children's lives in the globalized world. And I would also like to stress that children's literature research is in fact present in the Arcus Alliance through collaborations and networking with the colleagues from the University of Padua, University of Minho, Maynooth University, University of Graz, and University of Wrocław. And of course, we warmly welcome colleagues from the other partner universities to join us. And I would also like to invite you to get in touch with the Center for Research on Children's and Young Adult Literature at the Faculty of Languages, Literatures and Cultures at the University of Wrocław, which brings together colleagues representing various language departments, as well as colleagues from the Institute of Information and Media Studies. And thanks to our combined expertise, we are able to respond as children's literature and culture scholars to transformations that have been occurring in children's lives in times of digital hyperconnectivity and mass migration, when traditional nation-bound concepts of identity are increasingly giving way to understandings of belonging as shaped by superdiversity. This is a term used by or proposed by Steven Vertovec to refer to the pluralization of lifestyles, value systems, social norms, as he says. And as he says, it's to describe transformative diversification of diversity, which includes, of course, tensions between local customs and traditions and global contexts. Such a reflection is vital in light of the following data. According to the UN Refugee Agency Data Finder, at the end of 2023, of the 117.3 million forcibly displaced people, an estimated 47 million, so around 40%, are children below 18 years of age. And between 2018 and 2023, an average of 339,000 children were born as refugees per year. And this is, of course, not to say that geopolitical contexts of other children worldwide do not matter. Most young people already are transnational and transcultural subjects whose lives are informed by complex global economic, social, and cultural flows, even if they live in their homelands. These transnational identities are formed on an everyday basis. And regardless of age, I think, in fact, we all negotiate between and across cultures and languages, and we engage in a variety of mobilities, including the ones on our mobiles and computer screens when we interact on various border-free platforms. These diverse localities and realities are blending into a new form of simultaneous presence in the digitalized here and now, as Knapp and Kral describe it. Exploring and highlighting these processes is especially important in a world where children's voices are often marginalized in political discourse, while they are not just passive recipients of culture, but active subjects whose identities are formed through their everyday negotiations in encounters between cultures and across them. They are a productive cultural, social, and political force in the globalized world, in which, as Knapp and Kral put it, they create their ideas of identity and self-representation, use multiple forms of social interaction, and thereby develop various social affiliations and youth cultures. Children's literature and culture plays a crucial role in reflecting and shaping the lived experiences of millions of children, navigating displacement, hybridity, and intricate cultural and social networks that span multiple nations, languages, and identities. These texts mirror the pluralities and interconnectedness of global childhoods, helping audiences experience, make sense of, and relate to a world of many worlds, as De la Cadena and Plazer put it. And in this talk, I would like to share with you some thoughts on the field of children's literature and culture studies in the context of the diversity debate and various phenomena reflecting this pluralization. And I would like to argue that as scholars, especially scholars of children's literature and culture, but I think scholars in the humanities, we need to find ways how to direct our attention to the emergence of shared cultural spaces. And of course, in the Arcus Alliance, this is already happening in a very active way. And I will base this discussion on the international, interdisciplinary, intersectoral, and intergenerational project, Seen and Heard, Young People's Voices and Freedom of Expression, which explores the impact that children's books and culture can have on young people's understanding of human and children's rights, and especially freedom of expression. And as Geraldine mentioned, I participate in the project as the academic lead on the part of the University of Wrocław. And I will introduce our joint work in greater detail in a moment. For this discussion, I would like to highlight that we need both the research mapping the rise of children's books, which depict intricate social networks and the everyday experiences of communities existing across nations, states, cultures, and languages, But we also at the same time need empirical research with young readers that is informed by the cross-cultural layeredness and plurality of scholarship, multiple conceptualizations of childhood, and most crucially, by diverse children's life worlds. And this means engaging in reimagining communities around us, which may happen both through new narratives and through social and cultural practices more broadly, including the practices of research itself. Now, here are some central concepts in the diversity debate, and I just refer to sample publications. Of course, the literature is rich, and I just go very briefly through them. I'm sure you know most of them, but just they are here for our orientation. So, of course, multiculturalism. For the purpose of this talk, I'm thinking here of course, of the coexistence of diverse cultures and cultural differences within a society. So rather in this kind of descriptive sense than the normative one. In the latter, it is a philosophy advocating for the recognition and accommodation of cultural differences, and especially the idea that minority cultures deserve acknowledgement and protection within some kind of dominant political framework, and that this demand for assimilation, for their assimilation into the dominant culture, should be withheld. Then very often in connection with multiculturalism, we discuss interculturalism as well, which puts stress on communication and dialogue across ethnic boundaries in specific contexts, with a focus on policy interventions and group and interpersonal exchanges. So this is a very concrete policy juxtaposed with more abstract multiculturalism, with more kind of theoretical focus. It's just more pragmatic and kind of compromise-minded and focused on decision-making and finding a common ground in practice. Transculturalism highlights complex cultural exchanges in a globalized world that lead to the formation of identities inclusive of various cultural influences. Transnationalism centers on the multiple ties and interactions linking people or institutions across the borders of nation states that redefine traditional understandings of national identities, affiliations, and belonging as fluid and overlapping. And two very interesting concepts related, of course, to those more general ones that I've just mentioned. Post-nationalistic citizenship. I'm referring here to Rossi Braidotti's concept that emerges from the need to rethink European identity beyond the confines of the nation state. Braidotti talks of flexible citizenship, so a citizenship that is adaptable and inclusive of diverse hybrid subjectivities, that rejects the traditional liberal model of the autonomous individual in favor of an ever-emergent relational and dynamic subjectivity. And for her, it's also a bundle of, as she says, of rights and benefits, not necessarily tied to a singular national allegiance. So it also, we could say, exemplifies Braidotti's broader concept of nomadic subjectivity, which emphasizes fluid, interconnected identities and the ethical imperative to include marginalized voices in shaping collective futures. Braidotti also proposes another concept, becoming minoritarian. It involves a repositioning of the dominant subject position of Europe, kind of challenging the center-margin binary, and now Europe would need to be the margin in relation to what used to be the margins. And then post-migrant framework paradigm. This relates to the idea of becoming minoritarian, I think, by shifting a focus from migration as an exception or disruption to migration as a normal and constitutive element of contemporary society. It emphasizes that entire societies, not just migrants, are transformed by migration. I will refer to these concepts later as well. Children's literature reflects these ideas, for example, by problematizing notions of home, depicting experiences of forced and voluntary migration, of border crossings, also experiences of trauma and helplessness, and also models cultural multi-perspectivity, as Rubik argues in Transcultural Studies and Novels for Young Readers. Children's literature and culture also functions within a dynamic transnational network of cultural mediators. authors, translators, publishers, critics, digital influencers, and scholars who shape its production, circulation, mediation, and reception. Excuse me. While geopolitical power asymmetries certainly persist in these processes, and I'm thinking of the dominance of English, of the English language, of the Western canon, and corporate publishing, there is growing recognition of diverse and unexpected representations that challenge these hierarchies. The field of children's literature also both caters to and generates these engagements through festivals, book fairs, prizes, criticism, and scholarship. National contexts remain relevant, but multiple unknown and unexpected imaginaries, relations, and practices are increasingly appreciated. This complex system requires nuanced exploration and mapping that, as Claire Bradford already in 2011 noted, must do justice to young audiences' multiple positionalities and ways of reading. Following Gayatri Spivak's call for the cultivation of transnational literacy, Bradford emphasized the need to read and experience cultures differently, to recognize, after Spivak, a different kind of voice, or maybe I would say polyvocality, and to critically scrutinize our own histories of selfhood and scholarship. And this literacy enables all of us to avoid interpreting minority texts through dominant cultural assumptions, and instead encourages openness to alternative worldviews and to critical examination of our own cultural assumptions. With my colleague Juliana Fenech, we are working on an edited volume, Geopolitics, Activism, and Children's Literature, and we think that a useful way to conceptualize children's literature and culture and its role in all these processes is addressing how it functions in geosocialization. This is a term proposed by Kirsty Paulina Kallio. So geosocialization includes ways in which individuals and groups, children and young people as well, become politically and socially situated within their lived geographical environments and socio-political structures. In other words, these are processes by which citizenship, identity, and political agency are shaped both by formal institutions and by everyday practices and interactions. It highlights how people, as Kallio puts it, learn to be citizens through their engagement with place, space, and the socio-political dynamics embedded in those geographies. More specifically, in the context of children and young people, it is their becoming aware of their place in the world in which they live and which they share with others in physical and symbolic spaces, neighborhoods, schools, public spaces, other public spaces, but also social media platforms, and in which they also actively become citizen subjects with rights and agency. This process depends to a large extent on children's attentiveness to their life worlds that may result in, as Kallio puts it, oriented stances, articulated attitudes, purposive activities, and intentional action with the potential to maintain or challenge the status quo. Importantly, as Kallio stresses, in the geosocial perspective, this political mobilization, and I'm quoting here, does not exist in individuals, but between them, as a social process involving sharing and recognition. Geosocialization is thus a dynamic intersubjective process emerging from people's shared situatedness. And this situatedness also is shaped by connections and relationships rather than by fixed territorial boundaries. And I think that it's this kind of, or maybe one of tasks or aspirations of children's literature and culture research to examine how the cultural diversity of children's and young adult literature may encourage young readers to exercise their agency in their geopolitical contexts, sometimes disrupting the dominant adult-centric scripts of geopolitics in private and family and institutional settings. And I think that to explore in depth the role of children's literature and culture in these processes, we firstly need to pay attention to texts addressed to young audiences that represent global childhoods and that show how young people's agency is expressed or constrained by geopolitical structures, and how it may potentially help children and young people to empower themselves and to make their voices and agencies manifest in their everyday lives. And I would like to stress here this expression, this phrasing, empower themselves. We often hear that adults empower children or young people. I find it very problematic. I think we can facilitate this process. We can create spaces for that to happen. But after all, we all empower ourselves, of course, with some support from others or on our own. Now, those voices and agencies may be visible in small acts and practices and through young relationships with others and engagements with organizations and institutions, which in turn may inspire both young and adult readers to imagine more just, inclusive, and pluralistic futures. So we need to map texts that are potentially capable of this work. But secondly, this research effort should also take an empirical form, actively involving both young readers and adults as participants, co-researchers, and interpreters of texts and cultural experiences, thereby enriching our understanding of literature's and culture's role in shaping and reflecting diverse lived realities. And I would like to share with you an example of the latter kind of research, the project Seen and Heard, Young People's Voices and Freedom of Expression. It's a 3-year Erasmus Plus funded research, an engagement project that investigates the conditions, challenges, and possibilities surrounding young people's freedom of expression in contemporary Europe. The project explores, among others, the impact of children's books and culture on young people's understanding of human and children's rights. It's a project that centers children's voices and agencies. It's also a project that aligns with the tenets of the engaged humanities and citizen science, as it targets collaboration with non-academic actors and the public. And as you can see, the project brings together academic and social partners from Malta, Germany, and Poland, each contributing distinct disciplinary and cultural perspectives to a shared inquiry into youth agency, media literacy, and civic engagement. This project is coordinated by Dr. Justyna Deszcz at the University of Malta as the lead institution. And Juliana contributes expertise in youth literature, participatory pedagogy, and civic education. And her team also includes Sandy Kalea-Portelli, Charlie Cauchi, who is a film director, and Andres Felipe Algeciras Marquez, who is also a film expert and a film director. Then we have Humboldt University in Berlin, and Dr. Fariba Schulz, who is the academic lead there. She contributes expertise in migration studies, educational theory, and youth engagement in urban contexts. Another partner, Amnesty International Poland, which provides a human rights framework and facilitates outreach, advocacy, and youth-led initiatives. And here we are collaborating in particular with Katarzyna Salejko, who is human rights educator, and Nikki Parker, who is lead consultant for Amnesty International, and who has worked, among others, on creating children's literature about children's and human rights. And myself, the academic lead at the University of Wrocław, I offer expertise in children's literature, in research with children, participation, and intergenerational solidarity. And as you can see, we are also collaborating with local schools and cultural institutions, pupils, educators, artists, filmmakers, illustrators, publishers, and other researchers. And here's also our team. Together, we form a cross-sectoral and interdisciplinary consortium that reflects the diversity of European youth experiences and interdisciplinary and kind of interdisciplinarity that may produce context-sensitive approaches to freedom of expression. By foregrounding the voices of young people, particularly those from marginalized and underrepresented communities, we seek to understand how freedom of expression is experienced, negotiated, and sometimes constrained in different sociopolitical contexts. The project also examines how educational and cultural institutions can support youth in becoming active, critical participants in democratic life. Through our work, we exemplify how transnational academic and cross-sectoral collaboration can foster inclusive participatory research that not only studies, but also amplifies youth voices in the public sphere. And I would like to emphasize that the research I'm sharing in this presentation, of course, reflects the joint contributions and insights from the entire project team. And as you can also see, we work at 3 sites in order to trace and elucidate continuities, associations, and relationships across the three different locations and contexts. We look at young people's freedom of expression, our central anchoring concept, as it manifests itself locally, and then how it's also shaped by global realities, reflecting transnationalism and migration. Some of the links that we are following are, for example, the context of the school as an institution that by default regulates, if not suppresses, children's right to free self-expression and to reading and creative practices in which children engage to exercise this right. So one of the questions that we ask is about the challenges and opportunities of participatory research with children, specifically at schools, with the classroom being traditionally an heteronormative space, so a space that is regulated by age hierarchies and power imbalances between children and adults. And these connections, of course, across the locations are dynamic and uneven, negotiated locally, shaped by local structures of power and by cultural traditions. Here are our central research questions. I've mentioned some of them already, but perhaps I should stress this question about how children's literature and culture can influence, can inspire intergenerational activism. We are focusing on children, but I think to me personally, this project is very much about my own freedom of expression as well. And so the question for us is also about how we can inspire each other across generations. And I think now we are at the stage in our kind of coming to the third year of the project. We are at the stage when we wonder, what else can happen with our research, right? What will be its practical results, and also risks and further potential. So we are working at the moment on this particular question. And I think that also at the meta level of research and practice, we could say that we have been exploring how academics, educators, artists and activists and young people can foster intergenerational spaces of co-creation, as I mentioned earlier. Here is just a list of our key goals and at the same time activities that we are engaging in. So of course research, but also a docu-narrative. I will mention a little bit about it later, but it documents our work. Creative protests produced by young people and curated by the project team as the basis for a social movement. I will refer to it as well. Training and resources for educators, artists, activists, publishers, focused on human rights, on children's rights and freedom of expression in particular. Of course, academic publications, also an open access children's book co-created by members of our team, writers and illustrators, and also the young people involved in the project. And we are also planning a conference next year. I will also refer to it in a second. I think I would say, if we talk about goals more, I would say that in more general terms, we are trying to initiate intergenerational creative protest as a form of exercising the right to free expression through the collaboration of young people, schools, researchers, artists, and children's books authors. And we are also trying to think of how to initiate and implement an equitable and inclusive social movement. And I would like to emphasize that there are a number of projects of this nature in the field of children's literature and culture and education as well. Projects that center on engaged collaboration across age and expertise divides. So one of our priorities has also been the establishment of a critical friends network to facilitate the exchange of research practices and experiences. We believe pursuing such an inquiry is important in contemporary societies, in the context of current political, ideological, social, and ecological crisis, or kind of polycrisis, as it's often described as well, in which age is often the divider. And of course, we also encourage you to join us, to let us know about your work and join this network of critical friends. We think that we can at least try to counteract social polarization and conflicts through the methodologies we rely on. And in our project, our methodological framework relies on ethics of care for the well-being of all the participants. It's also a form of care for the super diversity that the project entails on so many levels, as I'm sure you have seen already. And these are just some crucial concepts for us. So children's and young people's protagonism. This refers to the active recognition and support of their capacity to act as social, cultural, and political agents. It involves listening to their voices, respecting their perspectives, and creating spaces where their contributions to social and communal life are genuinely valued and taken seriously. Epistemic justice involves embracing diverse forms of experience, knowledge, and ways of knowing, also those not formally recognized by academic institutions. So this includes, for example, the valuable insights children have about their own lived realities, as well as knowledge expressed and created through artistic practices. It calls for an inclusive approach to knowledge production that values voices and perspectives often marginalized or overlooked. Then ethics of care, and in particular, the concept of witnessing matters to us. We have this connection here between witnessing and witnessing, being with. It's a deeply careful, relational, and ethical mode of being with others, where the self is not just separate, but co-emerges in relation to the other. This concept challenges the traditional notion of witnessing as a detached observer, and instead emphasizes shared presence and responsibility, and also vulnerability and co-affectivity. In intergenerational and transcultural and transnational contexts relevant to our work, witnessing invites educators and learners to engage with the world and each other through empathy, mutual attentiveness, and curiosity, and also through co-experiencing and co-creating. Inter and intragenerational solidarity, and also this term rendering each other capable, which we also think is very, very productive and inspiring in our work. So it's about enhancing each other's abilities and potential, empowering each other, maybe one another, but also through collaboration, through exchange. By engaging children in meaningful conversations about their experiences and treating them with respect, compassion, and empathy, we actively uphold the principles of equality and justice for everyone, and of the solidarity as well. And arts-based research, in particular artography, as you see, we have this connection here between or a kind of blend of artist, researcher, and teacher. This is a methodology that indeed blends art making, teaching, and research, and these roles become interconnected, informing and transforming one another. It's experiential, relational, and often autobiographical. Artistic practices are not just outputs, they are central to the research process itself. And this approach enables engaging with communities in participatory ways. So it can be used in education, curriculum studies, social justice work, where traditional research methods may not fully capture the richness of lived experience. And I would like to stress that throughout our work on the project, children's voices emerge alongside ours, amplifying each other in an assemblage of mutually constitutive entanglements of childhood and adulthood, real people and fictional characters, stories in books and other media, emotions, schools, research methods, and other dynamics that have been unfolding throughout the project. And we capture these collectivities and relationalities as they materialize on many occasions, and we think of the child voice in our project as having this kind of trans-individual and polyvocal nature, also trans-cultural and transnational. But all this, nevertheless, does not erase individual bodies and minds in geopolitical and their geopolitical contexts. So now just a look at how the project has been unfolding. So we began with a survey asking children in all the 3 countries what freedom of expression means and how they relate to it in their own lives. And we followed up with literary workshops and a second survey. The surveys and the workshops were conducted in multiple languages, English, German, Polish, Ukrainian, to accommodate linguistic diversity. The literary workshops took a slightly different approach in the 3 countries. In Malta, the focus was on the discussion of who is given the power to speak and act in stories and whose perspective is left out. Then the workshop in Wrocław was dedicated to the question, can literature inspire us to act? And the Berlin workshop asked which children's and human rights are thematized in the children's books that we've used, and in what ways. And altogether, the participants were invited to browse the book selection, different, of course, in each country, depending on the young people's age, interests, and availability. And the children were asked to choose to explore some books in depth. Here is just a look at the workshops again. And after the workshops, the children were invited to sign up for a mentoring program aimed at supporting and accompanying them in developing a creative, peaceful protest about issues that bother them the most, and to be able to stand up for themselves and each other in a safe and effective way. And our mentoring program was led by academics, artists, and activists. Two of the mentors were award-winning writer Sita Brahmachari and illustrator Chris Riddell, and you can see them in the photos here. In the project, in the course of the Seen and Heard, we collaborated with 600 children. Of course, this is the maximum number. The particular numbers vary depending on the activities. But children coming from 48 nationalities. So these children come from or live now in Germany, Poland, or Malta, but some of them were born elsewhere, as indicated in the responses to our questionnaires. The group in Malta was most ethnically diverse and indeed included 48 nationalities. 15.8% and then 1.4% of students identified as having 2 and 3 nationalities respectively. Also, the schools we worked with in Berlin are both located in multicultural and gentrified areas, with the proportion of pupils of non-German nationality of 40-50%, and with high proportions of students from migrant and refugee backgrounds, Syrian, Turkish, and other non-German nationalities. One school had 80-90% of students with German as a second language. In Wrocław, we collaborated with a school that could be described as a typical public school located in the city center, and it's attended mostly by Polish children of mixed economic status and a small percentage of Ukrainian children, both those who have lived in Poland for some time and those who fled Ukraine after the Russian invasion in 2022. 6 Ukrainian children joined the project, and they were supported by a Ukrainian teacher. And we think that kind of, let's say, common denominator for our 3 different sites is the post-migrant context of the Maltese, German, and Polish societies. The post-migrant paradigm, as articulated by Naika Forotan, helps us understand contemporary societies shaped by migration, and it challenges the notion of migration and mobility as an exception or disruption, and instead emphasizes its normality and permanence in the globalized world. Forotan defines the post-migrant paradigm as a way to destabilize migration as a dominant marker of social difference, by shifting the focus from migrants as others to society as a whole, viewed through the lens of migration. This perspective invites a rethinking of national narratives, identity, and belonging, and calls for analyzing how entire societies, and not just the migrants themselves, are transformed by migration. And I think it also ties in with this post-nationalistic conceptualization of citizenship. Forotan also argues that post-migrant societies are inherently conflictive, as shaped by the often troubled dynamics of identity negotiation or political and cultural recognition. Extending the post-migrant perspective to the broader European context, particularly within the framework of EU migration debates and current border politics, remains a significant challenge. It's more of an aspiration, as Forotan said actually already in 2019, but I think it's still valid. In Displacing Europe's Past and Present, Re-examining Migration in Artistic and Critical Practices, Juvonen and Lino demonstrate how this change could occur through cultural practices. As they argue, it's necessary to reflect, and I'm quoting, on the signifying practices that inform artistic and critical reflections about human mobility in contemporary Europe, in order, as they say, to provide new insights into the broader cultural and socio-political entanglements of migration. Also, other scholars stress the role of literature and culture as active factors of change. And children's lit of the fields. where these insights may emerge and where such a transformation can be effected through creation and through sharing with young readers, sharing with them narratives that interrogate exclusion, discrimination, and racism, and that provide critical reflections on human mobility. And in our project, we attempted to centralize these concerns in several ways. In the surveys, we asked the participants the following 2 questions. So, have you often spoken up about something important by saying it, writing about it, or drawing it? Another question, if you have criticized something or protested against something, can you tell us what it was in a few words? And we also asked about what bothered the participants in the world around them. The respondents reported that they had spoken out, among others, about the need to treat others fairly, about the abuse of human rights in other countries, against anti-Semitism, racism, and genocide. A participant in Berlin mentioned situations involving a lack of respect for otherness, and in particular racism and religious discrimination. Some participants in Berlin referred to the exclusion they experienced at school, such as not being allowed to speak their native language or to fast. In Berlin, there were also references to Alternative für Deutschland, excuse my German pronunciation, a far-right and populist party in Germany. The references appeared several times, with one student commenting, "I was once at a demo against the AfD. I thought it was important to go there because I'm against right-wing extremism. And I think that everyone should have the same rights because we are all equal and there's no point in marginalizing people." Russia's war against Ukraine and also the Palestinian-Israeli conflict were mentioned as a cause for protest. We also focused more specifically on children's culture with a view to its geosocializing potential in a complex question about various motifs and themes present in books, films, social media, games. The participants were asked if they have ever read a book or watched a film or engaged online with stories about selected topics that, as we thought, mattered in the context of being seen and heard. And I put just 2 examples here. Films were the most frequently used source for nearly all topics, and online materials were the second most popular medium, which shows that young people tend to use a combination of all 3 mediums, books, films, and online content, to engage with stories across the various topics presented. I've also included here artwork from Sean Tenn's The Arrival, a really important book on migration, on the experience of migration, that we also used in the project. Books remained relevant, but conspicuously less than film, which should make us reflect on how literature can keep up with the current reality and how the visual content matters, and also how to make sure that children have access to good quality and thought-provoking films. This is also an indication that there is a niche for games that can convey these topics to young players. The concluding set of questions concerned young people's awareness of children's rights, starting with a general query, do you know what children's rights are? And then we listed 10 children's rights and asked the participants to mark the ones they know. And these rights include also the right to have a name, nationality, and to belong to a country. And also you have the same rights as every other child in the world, no matter who you are. In Malta, we got the highest percentage for these 2 rights. 90% of the respondents were aware of them. But in general, the majority of the children across the project indicated they remember these 2 rights, which I think also speaks to Braidotti's concepts of the bundle of rights that we share despite our geopolitical, geosocial locations. In the literature workshops, as I mentioned, they have different iterations in each country. They all focused on children's rights and in particular on free self-expression, including the context of migration and cultural identity. The books we shared with the children included internationally recognized ones like Sean Tenn's The Arrival, which I mentioned already, to discuss migration, exclusion, and resilience. Students in Berlin and Malta related it to their own experiences of marginalization, especially The Arrival, related it to their own experiences of marginalization and cultural difference, focusing on the motif of fleeing oppression and violence in one's country, arriving into a foreign place and feeling lonely. In Wrocław, the collection of books we explored with the participants included 2 Ukrainian books, Yellow Butterfly, A Story from Ukraine, and How War Changed Rondo, which encouraged the participants to reflect on the right to safety and peaceful life, but also on ways of expressing complex ideas and emotions like trauma, fear, alienation, loss, and how to search for hope through art. At the same time, we included German, Maltese, and Polish books, depending on the location, to ensure accessibility and cultural resonance, and to invite children to connect personal experiences with broader social issues, fostering empathy, critical thinking, and emotional literacy. And this approach helped us ground the discussions in familiar cultural references, while also opening space for dialogue across differences and shared human concerns. The next phase of the project was the mentoring program and the creation of protest films that were scripted, produced, and edited by the children themselves. This is just a handbook that we used in this activity, in this part of the project. Again, at the free sites, drawing on the mentorship of experienced artists. And we are planning to share these films on the website soon. And of course, we encourage you to visit and have a look. The films introduce both situated perspectives referring to local issues that children wanted to address, like corruption of national politicians or environmental issues at a particular location, and also transnational issues such as experiences of bullying, adultism, or the issue of fair fashion. The film medium enabled inclusivity and offered diverse opportunities for making sense of the world and for self-expression, including non-linguistic self-expression, while also opening space for protest. And here are just some slides. And we hope that when the films are presented together, it will be possible to appreciate how they mobilize diverse, effective repertoires and careful practices of solidarity and empathy across diverse histories, cultures, and societies, and how they show in practice that images and words may connect us with each other. And very briefly, I will just rush you a little bit now. Another activity that we are now engaging in is the co-creation of a children's book in the 4 languages of the project with Sita Brahmachari, Chris Riddell, who uses inspiration children's ideas expressed in word and image across all the intergenerational activities that we have undertaken in the project. And this is a process curated by Nikki Parker and Katarzyna Salejko from Amnesty International Poland. The book will be in open access. It will be distributed by a major publisher, but it will be also available on the website. And the docu-narrative, which I mentioned earlier, we are also planning to upload it soon. This offers a record of events, but I think in the project it's something more. It reflects our transnational community that includes young people, educators, artists, researchers, and our sharing of experiences, emotions, and perspectives across cultural, generational, and disciplinary boundaries. And just to conclude, seen and heard young people's voices and freedom of expression demonstrates that action-oriented approaches centering on superdiversity and in particular on creating meaning in relation to the other are not only necessary, but deeply enriching in both educational and research contexts. Through geographically and culturally diverse representations of childhood and child protagonists in literature, the project explores how such narratives can mobilize children's agency in political engagement. These stories, rooted in different cultural and geopolitical realities, offer young readers tools to reflect on their own lives and the world around them, encouraging them to see themselves as capable of negotiating their geopolitical contexts. In addition, by centering children's voices and using literature and art as bridges across cultures, the project validates diverse identities and experiences of both child and adult participants, creating a model for inclusive, rights-based education that fosters empathy, critical thinking, and active citizenship among young people, but also, I think, for us adults. Of course, we also are aware of our positionality as European scholars working within Western, Euro-Western frameworks of knowledge production and social contexts, but we hope that we are just one voice in a kind of growing chorus of all those who work on childhoods and with children elsewhere. A significant number of the participants in Malta expressed appreciation for being part of a study that is not just happening in Malta, which of course highlights the value of transnational dialogue that we managed to create in the project. Also, in our conversations with teachers, we often heard that they try to address complexities of current childhoods, including geopolitical contexts in their classes, despite the pressures of the time and the pressures of the curriculum, thereby responding to the pupils' emotional and cognitive needs. And when I asked the children in Wrocław whether they felt it would be easier now after our workshops to talk about their ideas, one participant responded, and I'm quoting, "We talked about the world and how it's okay to be different. It might be harder even now, because the more you talk, the more you think, and there might be an argument." And I think that this thoughtful reflection captures the essence of the Seen and Heard project. The conversations it fosters may complicate our understanding of children's rights and human rights more broadly, but it's precisely this complexity that can inspire us to seek more just, inclusive, and careful ways of living together, including an effort to create a citizenship education that enables us all to connect with each other and with the world. And it may inspire us to try to look for educational practices that can help us, that can use words and images to do this work of connecting us across differences. And we hope to continue this conversation with you, of course. And let me just share this information about our conference in February. We hope that this will be a site also for continuing these conversations. So please get in touch if you are interested in participating. And here are just references, which I'm also happy to share, of course. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Justyna, for this very interesting presentation. It's impressive to listen to the thoughts of the children, of the views they have. And I think, like what you said at the end, it shows that they are very mature as well, like of thinking of things, and then like they know that they will have to think even more because it raises other questions. So yeah, thank you. It was great to hear all of that, and I think it's very reassuring for the future as well. So it's a great project, and I'm very looking forward to watch the film they have made. I'm not seeing any question for the moment, but I'd like to know, like, in your opinion, like, how can educators incorporate transcultural and post-national perspectives in their classroom practices?
And of course, yeah, thank you for all these comments and for this question as well. Of course, it all depends on the subject, but I think that it is being taught. But I think in all the cases, it is about attentiveness and curiosity about children's experiences and children's thoughts. It's about finding maybe a little bit of space and time, but it has to be friendly. It has to be a space of trust as well, in which children can be encouraged to share their views on what they experience locally, but also on how they connect it with more kind of global contexts. And children are aware of these contexts. They watch the news, right? They read about events in the world. And I think creating such spaces, of course, once again, depending on the particular possibilities and opportunities at particular, or affordances, let's put it this way, in particular contexts, is vital. And literature, children's literature and culture, maybe films, music as well, can help teachers in connecting, right, with young people. But I think trust and openness and this curiosity for children's awareness and children's knowledge and children's views is crucial. Let me say as well that at least in the Polish context, I didn't know the children at the beginning, right? The children we were working with. We just introduced the project first very briefly, but then we met again with them at the workshops, the surveys first, but this was very kind of a brief moment, let's say. But then the workshops, and of course they didn't know me either. I facilitated the workshops, but I think this stance, this showing them, that we are there to listen, and also to that we have our doubts maybe, and our thoughts, first of all, on some context that are troublesome. It encourages them as well to open up and to share. And I'm sure teachers that, have their own ways as well of connecting with their pupils, and of building trust and this mutual curiosity.
Thank you. I have a question in the chat from Chang. How much do you think this kind of deep, serious topic is able to talk with kids, especially for kids from Ukraine? And she noticed that some friends of her from UA have some trauma of it, and she said, I found it really difficult to go through this topic about censorship, freedom, and even war.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this wonderful question. And very, I think, important question, because this speaks also to how we organize the whole project and the work with the young people. Of course, there are also other sensitive, difficult issues. It's unpredictable, right? What can come up in the conversations? Children shared with me thoughts about, the parents' divorce, for example. About bullying at school, and these are very sensitive issues as well. But we made sure, and that was part of this methodology of care that we rely on, that there is also there's always a psychologist with us who is prepared to support children emotionally at such difficult moments. And as I mentioned, we did have small Ukrainian group. We were afraid as well of sharing those particular books with them. But because I think we built certain conditions, the sense of safety. We also introduced the workshops, how we are going to work, and also we ensured the children that this is a safe space to share, to feel things, to experience things. I think that helped a lot. So I think all these conditions that are under our control to some extent, that they may be useful. Here, of course, it's a big responsibility. As well, I do agree, and it may not be possible everywhere to raise these topics, but I'm aware also of colleagues, like a colleague from Malta University, Aliona Jarova, who does in her research work on with children and the topic of war as such, but through art. And in our case, we also try to use artistic methods like film, for example, to address difficult topics. So I think maybe this is a way as well to navigate those difficult situations, right? Introducing topics through artistic media, like picture books. That's one thing, but also enable children to engage in critical activities. I know if that answers your question, but I do agree that this is of course a challenge, has been a challenge for us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Justyna. Maybe I have time for another question, the last one maybe. What were the main challenges you faced when you were doing the project with children in school, because they have different cultural settings, like in Malta, for instance, and in Germany and in Poland. So how did you manage those differences?
Yes, that's a very good question that, of course, kind of has stayed with us for a long time, even before, well, we needed to face it, of course, even before we started the field work, let's say, at the schools. But part of it was also building a connection and trust with the schools themselves as communities, with the teachers, with head teachers as well. And first building this connection And then also with parents, we organized meetings for parents as well, for parents and guardians. That also mattered. So building again this sense of community and trust, I think this is helpful. And we all worked, I mean, the particular teams, national teams, let's call it this way, worked with schools at their sites. So of course, we have some orientation as well, as far as the education system is concerned, all the pressures, ideological pressures as well, that are a factor in such collaborations. So I think a lot of attentiveness, a lot of sharing and sharing experiences, but also openness and conversations with teachers, with head teachers and parents. That helped a lot. But there was this willingness on our part, but also what we appreciate, this interest and commitment on the parts of the institutions and parents and guardians as well. So we are thankful for that, because without that, those activities would not have been feasible at all.
Yes, and as you were saying, like, communication is the key sometimes. So we need to communicate all together. I don't see any more questions. No. So thank you very much, Justyna. It was very, very interesting. I look forward to watch the film realized by the children.
Yes, please visit our website. More content is coming. Yeah, visual contents in particular. Yeah.
So that's great. Thank you so much. I wish you a very good day. And thank you for everybody who watched the webinar. And I look forward to the next webinar. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.